Bearcat Blitz, another victorious episode. This time, Neil and I both nailed the prediction as Cincinnati gets it done in one of the more fun, thrilling games in terms of the basketball beat that I have covered over the past few years. It was an electric atmosphere at Fifth Third Arena, and Cincinnati holds on amidst as much as I believe, a 13-point lead over Baylor, 13-point lead at halftime. They hold on for the 69-67 win amidst a barrage of threes from the future lottery pick VJ Edgecombe in the second half and a couple of mismatches down low from leading scorer Norchad Omier. They were still able to get it done and overcome that to get a brief quad one win that has now moved to quad two. We'll get to all that on the latest Bearcat Blitz. I'm, of course, your host, Russ Eltman. You can catch the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, on Talking Cats with Russ Eltman. He's my co-host across the way there, Neil Meyer of rival Cincinnati site, thefrontofficenews.com. Check out all their great work there. And check me out on Cincinnati Bearcats on SI, where we'll have a fresh look at NCAA Tournament Tracker update. Haven't been able to do one because the Bearcats haven't prompted one in the midst of the middle of their Big 12 conference slate, but they've won 5 of the past 7 after the victory over Baylor, and they still have a puncher's chance to make the NCAA tournament as we get ready for the number 4 Houston Cougars battle on Saturday. We'll get a comment or two from Wes Miller on that matchup in the coming days, and we will give our thoughts on that in the back half of the show after we recap the Baylor win and get you caught up on where Cincinnati stands right now in the NCAA tournament projections. But first, got to tell you all about our great presenting sponsor, Bet Online. They're the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source, from every three-pointer to hat trick. BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. And BetOnline basically had this matchup, Neil, nailed to a T, as the line went from 1.5 to 2.5 across the 24 hours it was open on the betting sphere. Hopefully, if you took that number, you got it on the earlier one. If you're a Bearcats backer and you were able to cash that bet, they moved to 17-11 on the season, 7-10 in conference play, still with that 10-10 record possible, a record that will assuredly, Neil, get them into the NCAA tournament if they can pull it off before conference tournament action starts. We're about 2 weeks away from it as we record here right now. But first, the 69-67 win over Baylor. Cincinnati has a great first half. They hold the Baylor Bears under 45% shooting. I believe VJ Edgecombe, he was 1 of 3 in the first half. They completely took him away, only took 2 3-point attempts in that frame. But then he goes 4 of 6 in the second half, 5 of 10 overall, scores 14 points. Norchad Omier has 11 points, and an all-important, Neil, Tony Padilla flub. I mean, it was another masterclass of disaster from this referee crew. They were horrible again, and this time it benefits the Bearcats. I was talking to Chad Brindle, the Bearcat Journal, in the middle of the game, right when it happened, in the final 10 minutes, when Norchad Omier got called for his 4th foul, did not foul Dylan Mitchell at all. The dude Dylan Mitchell just tripped over his own feet, and the referee crew called the foul. It completely changed the game. From that point on, Cincinnati was able to hold on, I think in large part because Omier did not get featured and was not on the floor for much of the final 10 minutes. And overall, Cincinnati gets the 3-point ball cooking again with the return of Simas Lukosius. What a warrior, gutty, gritty effort by him to play 17 minutes in this contest. He hits 2 huge threes. They go 10 of 23 overall after, I believe, hitting 11 total threes in their past 2 games. Day Thomas wasn't very efficient, but he hits a big shot down the stretch. He gets a massive, gritty Bearcat ball rebound to seal the game, and just kept on fighting to go with 18 points, a game high from Jizzle James, who wasn't efficient in his own right, 6 of 20, but got to the rim, got to the free throw line enough, just like we've been talking about, to get the job done and hit the team high 3 of 8 from outside. And then Dylan Mitchell, 13 points, 9 rebounds. He has elevated his game right when Cincinnati needs it, led the team in efficiency score, I believe, with a, 22 overall efficiency mark, and just ahead of the best story this season. And one of my favorite stories, Neil, of my entire time, almost a half decade covering Cincinnati Bearcats football and basketball, Josh Reed goes 9 shots made in a row at one point, dating back to the game against TCU over the weekend, scores 11 points, a career high 33 minutes, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and was the best defender once again on the floor. And not only did I think that, but Wes Miller echoed that, Neil, in his post-game press conference, saying that Josh Reed has been getting the highest defensive grade marks almost every game in and out. And he was a massive factor. And they even ran some offensive plays for him in a season where a few months ago he was getting, I'm pretty sure he got a couple DNPs, and now he's getting offensive sets run for him. What a rise. What a journey for Josh Reed, and what an inflection and an injection, I should say, of fun and just wild card atmosphere for this roster down the stretch. A team that's having a lot of fun and showing a lot of confidence, according to Jizzle James.
Yeah, and Russ, the first thing I'm going to hit on was the officiating. I mean, you talk about Tony Padilla and this crew being horrendous this whole season in the NCAA, but what's even funnier on that aspect is, I don't know if you saw it, Russ, during the game, the picture from LASIK, the company on Twitter,
Yeah,
was
courtside,
them, somebody tagged them and was like, at LASIK, we're going to need you tonight with this officiating crew. And then what happens? LASIK sends a picture from somewhere courtside. Don't know who they have accounts. I'm fairly certain they have a headquarters in Cincinnati, but they send a picture from courtside and goes, "Don't worry, I'm here." And that they said on location, ready to offer the refs LASIKs at halftime, was the the tweet. But overall, that was pretty funny. But you mentioned it, Russ. I'm not sure if it was
and
you
Neil,
or
it
I.
thankfully didn't hurt the Bearcats referee-wise, because they held, just like we talked about in the preview, they held a great free throw team to just 5 attempts.
Yeah, and Russ, I believe I nailed the head on, or nailed the screw on the head in the coffin on the Bearcat Tip-Off Talk podcast with Alex and JT. This team could not afford to sit Josh Reed and move him back to the bench if Simas Lukosius was available. That's
Right.
something that I echoed very well on that podcast. JT and Alex said the same thing. I'll say it here. Cincinnati cannot afford to take Josh Reed out of the lineup right now,
What a
especially
statement.
the way he has been playing. I mean, you look down 34 minutes last night, a career high, but on top of it, VJ Edgecombe is a top 5 projected pick for a reason. Everybody who watched last night saw that. Everyone who's watched him over the last 12 games has seen that. But overall, he has been the spark that Cincinnati has needed over the last, 2.5, 3 weeks? Without the play of Josh Reed right now, Russ, I think Cincinnati, if Josh Reed doesn't step up at 2-8, it could be safe to say that this team might be sitting at a 5-10, a 6-11. Like, that record might not be where we're at right now without the energy that Josh Reed has provided. I mean, last night he was fantastic on VJ Edgecombe, especially there in the first half. But that's the difference maker, Russ, right? In the first half of this game, Cincinnati takes a 39-26 lead into the break. And what did they do over the final 4 minutes of that stretch in the first half? Baylor went 1 for their last 8 in the first half. Think about that. When you hold a very good team in Baylor to 1 of 8 down the stretch in the first half, it's safe to say you're doing something very well. And then on
Yeah, and
top
I
of it,
think, Neil, Baylor was top 15 in offensive efficiency coming into this game overall. Yeah, they're ranked 13th right now on KenPom in adjusted offensive efficiency. That's an impressive thing to do.
exactly. And I mean, you look down, right? You see 4 guys in double figures. Josh Reed with 11. Dylan Mitchell, I thought, played his absolute butt off and has been over the last few weeks. You've really seen him elevate his game. 13 points, 9 rebounds. Jizzle James, another 18-point performance. Day Thomas with 10. But, Russ, the biggest thing I want to harp on is you might not be seeing the numbers there for Aziz Bandago in the offensive side of things, but he's a warrior, and people don't know this. Wes Miller
Yeah.
even came out and said it last night. he tweaked his ankle at the beginning of the second half and gutted through it. And what happens down the stretch? Aziz Bandaogo makes one of the biggest plays of the game, and it's on that final possession where instead of grabbing that rebound and what could potentially be something that could end up in Baylor's favor, he just swats that thing out of bounds. That's a smart IQ play, especially in a close game like that. But man, you talk about a gritty performance all the way around. You can go on and on about gritty performances from this team, but it starts with Aziz Bandaogo. I think everybody kind of sees the energy that he brings. I mean, Russ, we've seen him go over 2 to 3 rows of stands for loose balls. We're seeing him play injured. We're seeing him shoot free throws nonstop during practice, during water breaks. Like, he is the definition of a Bearcat. Like, people might not see the behind the scenes stuff that we see, but Aziz Bandaogo is the definition of a Cincinnati Bearcat.
Great note there, Neil. And he was got a huge shout out from Wes Miller, justifiably, because his defense on Norchad Omier in the first half was the reason they won the basketball game. Not the reason, but a huge reason they won. And being able to keep one of the best post players in the country, a veteran at that, to what was he in the first half? Just 2 of 4 overall, just kept denying him looks at the rim, kept denying him even opportunities to get field goal attempts up. So that was massive, just a massive, massive performance for Cincinnati. And now, Neil, they have to continue this into their last real known opportunity to fully, truly impress the committee. If you can go on the road and find a way to, I believe, Neil, correct me if I'm wrong here, get your first win over Houston of the Wes Miller era and get to 1-8 all time in the Wes Miller era against Houston, then you are going to be sitting very pretty to get in the NCAA tournament. And you may not have to win your final 2 games if you can get this additional quad 1 victory on the board. We'll talk about that, and we'll preview the matchup in terms of Houston this weekend on Saturday at 4 p.m. on CBS, and where Cincinnati stands in the NCAA tournament hierarchy projections after this break on Bearcat Blitz. All right, Neil, seeing where Cincinnati stands right now in the projections, they're 17-11 overall, number 45 on Bart Torvik. They are number 53 in KenPom, 37th in BPI, and 46th in the net. They unfortunately did not move up in the net because that victory against Baylor knocked Baylor from a quad 1 to a quad 2 win, as Baylor entered the contest 30th overall and now sits at 31 nationally in the net rankings. They need the Bears to keep winning. They need BYU to keep winning. And it would be good if UCF kept winning as well to move all of those matchups into quad 1 status at the end of the season. But from where we stand right now, just 1-9 in quad 1, 8-2 in quad 2, 1-0 in quad 3, and 7-0 in quad 4 games. The Bracket Project has not updated their matrix for the February 26th update as we sit here today, but Cincinnati entered that game on just 1 bracket, Neil, out of 116 confirmed verified projections. So still plenty of work to do. They're basically the last team on the bubble in terms of other at-larges right now. And when you look at where they sit overall in terms of projections on Bart Torvik, 27% chance to make the NCAA tournament. And on ESPN, we'll use ESPN now because they have adjusted their BPI metric to be a little bit more trustworthy over the past couple of weeks after just being completely out of whack earlier in the season. I mean, midway through conference play, they had Cincinnati with like a 56-70% chance to make the tournament, which was not correct at all. They're at 35% now on ESPN. If you can get those teams to become quad 1 wins, and you can get this job done against Houston, you may not have to go on a run in the Big 12 conference tournament. But Neil, I think the biggest issue for Cincinnati is there's almost always 1 or 2, maybe 3 Cinderella automatic bid stealers in the big major conferences. Probably won't be 3 this year, but you got to expect 1 to 2 to happen. So that's going to take away a spot off the bubble, a weak bubble at that, which is going to help Cincinnati for sure. And it's just very difficult to impress the committee in the conference tournament unless you can win 3 or 4 games. 3 games would get them to the semifinals from where they stand right now as the 12 seed, as we discussed this entering if the conference tournament were to start today, and 4 wins would get you to the conference championship game. Now, if they won 4 games in the Big 12 tournament and they ended the season with at least 5 to 6 wins overall down the stretch here, I think you get into the NCAA tournament. I think at 22, 23 wins before Selection Sunday, it's going to be hard to keep Cincinnati out given where the bubble is. But the issue of the automatic bid stealing and just the lack of major weight on, especially on those early conference championship games, is going to be, I think, a big hang up for Cincinnati if they're not able to add this confirmed Q1 win on the road Saturday against Houston, a team that Bart Torvik projects them to lose pretty handily against right now. They have Houston winning that game 69-54 as of this recording, a 15-point differential, which would be the biggest loss for Cincinnati in this series against Houston over the past 2 years. They've done a pretty good job of keeping it in single digits against the Cougars, but they haven't been able to break through.
Yeah, Russ, I think that's right where I'm kind of sitting too in terms of Cincinnati's NCAA hopes, right? Because you have not only the big quad 2 victory over Baylor last night on Tuesday, but on top of it, if you can go into Houston, right, and you pull out this big quad 1 victory over a Houston team who, since entering the Big 12, are now back-to-back Big 12 regular season champs, it's a monumental win for Cincinnati's resume as they prepare for the final 3-game stretch and prepare
Neil,
for
the biggest reason it's so big is there's multiple teams on the bubble that are maybe have worse or even records with Cincinnati, but have 4 or 5 quad 1 wins already.
Yep. And that's a huge thing that the selection committee will look at. However, if Cincinnati is able to pull it off versus Houston on Saturday, that'll be the first victory over Houston under head coach Wes Miller. And that's a huge win because Houston right now, Russ, is sitting, number 4 in the country, if I remember right. On top of it, you get that victory. That's their top 10 win. That's a huge quad 1 win. That boosts your resume a little bit. But it not only gets you out of the 12 seed that you're in potentially, because right now Cincinnati is projected a 12 seed. And who do they play right now, Russ? Game 1, it would be Utah. And then they would turn around in game 2. The first team that they would face out of the opening round would potentially be BYU. And if I'm Cincinnati right now, I do not want to play BYU. Simply, not even Cincinnati. If I'm any team in the Big 12 right now,
they're cooking.
I do not want to play Kevin Young and BYU right now just because of how well they're playing. So on top of it, if Cincinnati is able to get that 11 seed, they'll be able to fall back and they will get out of the early slate of the Big 12 Conference Tournament, Russ. And that's a huge thing to note because if Cincinnati is the 12 seed in the Big 12 Tournament in 2 weeks, they not only have that 11:30 a.m. game, but they will have a much harder path to get to the NCAA Tournament because they will have to go through a BYU, go through a Houston again potentially. Meanwhile, if you're the 11 seed, you'll have to go through an Oklahoma State. Then you get to play Iowa State, who they played very well on the road in the first place until that final.
And just lost to Oklahoma State. Like the Iowa State can be beaten in this conference.
Yes, correct. So overall, there's a lot of things that could trickle down here in the Big 12 over the next 2 weeks. But really, for Cincinnati, if you get a win at Houston on Saturday, realistically, Russ, you would like to see them make a run in the Big 12 tournament, as everybody would love to see that happen. But realistically, if you get that quad 1 win over Houston, then you're able to hold on to Oklahoma State and Kansas State in the next week. You build that momentum. You might only have to win 1 game.
I don't know that they have to win any games, Neil. If they win out, I don't think they're going to have to win any games. It would help for sure, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, if you win out, great. That puts you in spot. You're at 10-10. I think it's going to be hard to keep a 10-10 Big 12 team out of there compared to a 10-8 Big 10 team or 9-9 Big 10 team, whatever that might be. However, you would like to see them continue to move that momentum into the Big 12 tournament because obviously you don't want to just be sitting securely on the bubble because as everybody else in this industry knows, with how the selection committee does things, you might think you're in, And then reality comes, you're not actually in the NCAA tournament. So, however, keep the ball rolling, Cincinnati. If you go 3-0, keep that ball rolling, win at least one in the Big 12 tournament, maybe two. That should solidify everything for you.
Why not just win the whole Big 12 tournament, Neil? Why
Or
not?
that.
Just automatic bid it. Why not? You leave no doubt.
I know from covering the Big 12 media days, there was a fellow Bearcat named Aziz Bandego who was pretty thrilled to host that Big 12 championship belt. And
look good doing it.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that.
You and I both, Neil, we would love to be covering the NCAA tournament as members of the Bearcats media scrum going into mid-March. We shall see if they get it done first, though, and all focus on this game on Saturday before the next two and any kind of run in the Big 12 tournament slate at Houston on Saturday, 4 p.m. CBS. We'll preview that coming up on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Tale of the tape here, Neil. In just I wrote about it in the NCAA tournament tracker, just an eerily fitting opponent that can flip the direction of Cincinnati's season heavily, going up against their arch nemesis this decade over the past two conferences they've been a part of in the Big 12 and the AAC. Houston 24-4 on the season. They are number 3 in the net, number 4 in the AP top 25, number 3 on Ken Palm, while Cincinnati sits at number 46 in the net, 53rd on Ken Palm. And they enter this game in a probably double-digit underdog role. We'll wait to see that probably with those numbers coming out on Friday. Cincinnati just 4-7 on the road this season, while Houston is 14-1 at home at the Fertitta Center in Houston, Texas. Neil, starting on offense for Cincinnati, going up against this Houston Cougars defense, it's an absolute bear of a defense. Number 3 in adjusted defensive rating on Ken Palm. We know what they bring to the table. We know what their identity is. Tough, gritty, smack you in the face basketball, owning the glass, dribbling out, driving out possessions. Houston this season has not been very fast, to say the least. 360th in adjusted tempo out of 364 teams nationally. They're going to grind this game to a pulp. They're going to make Cincinnati play half-court offense. They're going to force Cincinnati to hit tough jump shots over the top. They're not going to allow them to make shots at the rim. We just talked about last game, Baylor allowing 70% at the rim. Well, this Houston team's allowing almost like half of that. 53% at the rim, to pick off about 17% from that tally in terms of what they allow at the rim this season. Projected to lose this matchup 69-54 on Bart Torvik, giving them just a 5% chance to win. It's really hard, Neil, to see any major gaps that Cincinnati can pressure on the offensive side of the ball. It might just take Herculean shooting efforts from Jizzle James, from Josh Reed, from Seamus Lukosius to maybe open things up for Dylan Mitchell, maybe get to the foul line a little bit. But Houston is not a fouling team, just like Cincinnati. Their opponents take just 17.6 free throw attempts per game. That's around middle of the pack in the Big 12. And Houston does not rely on free throw attempts, like Cincinnati's last two victories over their last two opponents have been a clear way for them to widen the gap and get a win. Houston doesn't rely on that, shooting just 15 free throw attempts per game in conference play. Offensively, Neil, it's just going to be very difficult for Cincinnati to hit the 60-point mark or even the 65-point mark in this contest, given all those factors.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Russ. And everybody kind of knows this is going to be a low scoring game because Houston is a tough, gritty team that does so many things well on the defensive end. And Kelvin Sampson does a fantastic job down there at Houston. One of the best coaches in college basketball. Everybody knows that.
However, built the Death Star. It's amazing.
But they're going to come out there and they're going to try to punch you in the mouth right away. And what's different about this Houston team this year compared to what it was a season ago is you look down, they're not rattled with an injury bug. Last year, Houston got smacked with injuries. They lost Juwan Roberts for a couple games as he was banged up. Terrence Arsenault tears his Achilles in the offseason. Joseph Tugler gets hurt. Javier Francis gets hurt last year. Ramon Walker was banged up. This is a fully healthy Houston team. And
the Death Star is operational, Neil, to the fullest extent.
And speaking of a Death Star, Russ, you look on top of it. A guy like Juwan Roberts has won a conference championship every year since 2019. Think about that.
Amazing. It's just amazing.
He takes advantage of that extra year because of COVID, and then the red shirt, and then you get six conference championships out of it. So I mean, you know what you're going to get in Houston, and they are very good at the Fertitta Center. They are very good at home. Like that is, I think Kelvin Sampson has built not only the Death Star down there in Texas, but he has built a legit environment to where teams do not win at the Fertitta Center.
It's going to be a packed house there on Saturday afternoon as well. No reason for those fans not to just show up and show out against a team that they do not like very much in Cincinnati. A lot of history there.
Especially when you hold 17,000 in a venue like that. I'm sure you'll see 17,000 plus on Saturday, especially with that game being on CBS, just due to the indications of what this game could mean. It's going to be a tough environment for Cincinnati. And on the offensive end for Cincinnati, you're going to have to knock down shots versus Houston team. You're going to have to knock down shots. You're going to have to try to get them in foul trouble early. However, Cincinnati, if you get to the foul line, you got to make your free throws. You got to make your free throws. You're sitting shooting 66% from the free throw line on the season. Russ, they're going to need a 15 of 17, 19 of 21 performance from the foul line if they're going to win this game. You got to make your free throws, because there's one thing, if Houston does get opportunities, they're going to make their free throws. So Cincinnati, you got to take advantage. You got to come out. You got to be aggressive early. You got to knock down some shots. Russ, this could be a good game, and I think this could be a game where Cincinnati proves a lot of people wrong on Saturday just because of how well they've been playing as of late.
Maybe a little preview of Neil's prediction right there. And to Neil's point, you got to hit your free throws and you got to get to the line heavily. I mean, in their losses this season, you have 27 free throw attempts. You have 34 free throw attempts. You have 19 free throw attempts. No team has beaten them really this season without getting to the free throw line heavily at least 17 plus times, which Cincinnati was able to do and has been able to do consistently over the past couple games. But they have to get to the aggression point on offense. You can't be taking these step back mid-range jump shots. You can't be fading away on these shots that Houston really wants to make you take. And on top of that, Neil, almost all three of their four losses have seen a team take 20 plus threes and hit 36% of them. Like, you got to get them up. You got to get them up if you're Cincinnati. You got to dial into another sharpshooting performance like they did against the Baylor Bears. And you got to figure that out in terms of breaking down that offense, that defense in the half court, and getting to those threes at high volume. It's imperative, and it's a huge, huge factor. 25 plus threes at least attempted in this game is going to be a good formula for Cincinnati to hopefully pull off an upset on their front. Defensively, Neil, when you're talking about Cincinnati's defense versus the Houston offense, it's even tougher this time around than I think it's ever been, because of what Houston has added in terms of shooting this offseason. That's the biggest thing for me. We're talking about the three-point shooting for Cincinnati. They can't let teams shoot over the top of them and hit threes like they have so well throughout conference play. Baylor, another issue on that front there. A great shooter in BJ Edgecombe, goes 5 of 8 from downtown. They hit 11 of 25 threes. That was the biggest reason this game on Tuesday night was a 2-point contest, because Baylor hit 44% of their threes. If Houston hits 44% of their threes on Saturday, it's going to be a 10 to 15 point blowout. They are one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the entire country, the best 3-point shooting team in conference play so far in the Big 12, 39% from deep. That's first in the conference, but they don't take a ton. They're only taking 19.6 threes, Neil. So they haven't had to tap into a high volume on that front, but they will if things start to get tight. And you got a guy like LJ Cryer who can fill you up for 25 to 30 points. 44% from Milo Suzan, 38% from Emmanuel Sharp in conference. These are all in-conference play numbers. You got Terrence Arsenault as well, 36%. You got 4 high-volume three-point shooters that can really damage Cincinnati, and we know how good Dylan Mitchell and Aziz Bandago are on the interior. But once again, I can't believe I'm saying it. Can Josh Reed find a way? Can these perimeter defenders find a way to bother Houston enough to get to those final 5 minutes with the game close and try to close it out there? That's my biggest question, and it's a question that I don't think UC is going to have an answer for quite yet. Maybe 1 year away, one more Shanabayev type talent, Keyshawn Tillery type talent, major microwave scorer addition in the transfer portal type talent away from being able to beat a team like Houston. I think Cincinnati falls in this one in a close matchup, 64-62. It's a classic. It's a defensive war. It's a shot making fest in the final few minutes, but the pedigree of Houston at home wins out in the end. What do you have, Neil?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's going to come down to, can Josh Reed have another great defensive performance? For me, Russ, another thing I'm looking at for Cincinnati, can Dan Skillings come back and make an impact? Because on top of it, Russ, I'm not sure if you noticed this tidbit. We are now seeing Dan Skillings play with a little bit more confidence. And Russ, I'm fairly certain you probably noticed it as well. But over the last 2 games, Dan Skillings has not been wearing the knee sleeve. So it finally feels like
didn't commit a turnover on Tuesday. Looked better with the basketball for sure.
Might be an indicator that he might be back fully healthy, fully confident in that knee after the offseason injury or whatnot. There's still a lot of things that go into that. But however, could he be a guy that comes off the bench and makes an impact? Could Simas Lukosius get back to the Simas Lukosius we saw in non-conference play? I know he's still dealing with an injury. Could Josh Reed step up? Overall, it's going to be a low-scoring affair, Russ, right? Houston does not let many teams score at all. But on top of it,
UC, I think, is 290th in tempo as well. So it's just going to be a
grinded-out game. Affair. These games have always been grinded out, low-scoring, defensive battles. I'm going 66-62 in favor of the Cougars on Saturday.
Both in the 60s. We'll see if I would love to have this podcast fully proven wrong and suffer my first L in predictions in a few weeks. 23-5 on the season predictions, trying to move to 24-5, but would gladly take the 6th loss if it means Cincinnati could get that massive quad 1 win over Houston. We'll see if they can get the job done on Saturday afternoon. Should be a big one at 4 p.m. on CBS. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.